Welcome to another great episode of American Rifleman Television, brought to you by Sturm Ruger, rugged, reliable firearms. Now this week we continue our look at the men and guns of the Battle of the Bulge. We'll also test the striker-fired SIG P320. And finally, for I Have This Old Gun, we'll look at the Remington Model 51. But right now, let's talk about the men and the guns of the Battle of the Bulge.
During the siege operation around the city of Bastogne, Belgium, various American Army units occupied positions around the city. It included the 9th Armored Division, elements of the 10th Armored Division, and then famously the men of the 101st Airborne Division. Now, as the various regiments of the 101st arrived in Bastogne, they were distributed out in a perimeter around the city. In this area here, the Bois, the Jack Woods, were the men of the 2nd Battalion, 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment of the 101st Airborne Division. And when the men of the 2nd of the 506 moved into the Bois Woods, they had to endure the bitter cold of the closing days of December 1944, and then the opening week of January 1945. During that time, they endured the experience of occupying foxholes throughout these woods. Those men would then ultimately push out from these woods and push toward a town just over that way called Foy. But before that happened, you had several weeks of men experiencing the brutality of World War II combat, and then also the misery and suffering of camping outdoors in one of the coldest winters on record in Europe.
So 58 of us went in on the Bois against a battalion of Germans. And that's when I used my 45 extensively, because I carried my rifle up in my arm here to protect it, because every time you touched it, it had snowed 10 inches of snow. And it was in these pine trees, and every time you touched one, it would cascade, and the top one, and then it got bigger, 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 and went down your neck, and your rifle, and your sights, and in your bore. And so I carried the rifle over here, and I used the 45. And because it would come around the pine tree, you could bend the limbs down. I did that. I came down on the limb, and I shook the snow was that deep on the limb, and I shook the limb, and I came around, and just at that moment, a German came around the other side. And I just jammed the 45 forward, and I up against his cheek, and I pulled the trigger. It was all out war.